We are kicking off day 2 of G'day Sharm El-Sheikh. We're joined by Clea Kaske-Kuck from WBCSD and also at the moment Peter Richardson from Manifest Climate. And I thought that today we would frame the conversation around the AAA.
Yay!
Ambition, action, and accountability. And we'll do accountability first. But what I always want to do is ask the standard opening question, which is, why are you both here? And is this your first COP? So we'll go Clea first.
Okay, so why am I here? And is this my first COP? Second answer is really easy to answer. No, it's not. Last year I was in Glasgow in person. I followed COPs for a while. It's also part of my job, but physically present last year Glasgow, this year Sharm. Lots of differences. One of the paramount ones, if you see me doing this, it's actually because there are flies running around. And I'm constantly, inadvertently trying to push some fly away. So I'm not being like nervous. It's just flies.
Well, I'm wondering if Australia brought them.
I've never seen something like this. I mean, I can share a few of my interesting observations about COP, but practically speaking, why are we here? And why am I here? So I lead the World Business Council, Sustainable Development Policy and Advocacy work, as well as business mobilization. And what we have seen increasingly is a growing interest from leading companies around the world to be here, to be at COP. And obviously as WBCSD, we want to be here, represent them, but also help them come here and position our collective work well, which we have done this year under the AAA framework around accountability, ambition, action. And I would especially highlight the role of accountability here. Companies have made a lot of commitments, but how are they actually holding themselves accountable and how are they being held accountable? Also on a global level, because right now there are all these different standards, divergent perspectives on meeting their climate commitments. So that's why I'm here. And obviously I'm also here to learn, to listen, to meet people. And I've had some amazing opportunities already. Happy to go into those. But again, it's super cool to be here.
Well, thank you. And a big shout out to WBCSD and We Mean Business, because I should have opened by saying we're actually meeting on the land of the WBCSD and the We Mean Business Coalition at their pavilion, if you couldn't already tell. An extraordinary pavilion. Much like all the other extraordinary pavilions here, they are massive this year. Truly massive. And we'll hopefully be bringing you in the next couple of days either a recorded podcast or a live stream from the Australian pavilion. But I will tell you more about that in the next couple of days. Now, Pete, again, same question. First timer, long timer, and why are you here?
Well, I'm with Clea actually. I'm in the 2-time club, but have been tracking COPs all the way back to 2002. In my role, I was in a previous life. I was a lawyer for many years, and followed the negotiations around Article 6, and way before that with the Clean Development Mechanism and JI and all that kind of stuff. So today I head up the research function of Manifest Climate, which is a technology-enabled company that really is aimed to bring transparency to the capital markets around climate-related financial risks and opportunities. So really, I'm here to meet people, as Clea says, and to learn a lot. We're also delivering a report, which actually quantifies for the first time the delta between disclosures in alignment with things like the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures and decision useful disclosures, which is a very different thing. Today, over the last couple of days, and I think we'll get into it, I have been very impressed by the national statements, and I think we can touch on those. And two of the three speakers that I would pick out were women. So it goes back to your point that we talked about. But we can get into that. And just to finish, I would say, this is called an implementation COP, but for me, it really is the accountability COP, in the sense that we are hearing a lot of voices calling and holding people to account, Clea, just as you say, business, but also leaders holding each other to account for the commitments and the pledges that they've made.
So let's expand on that, because you and I were talking about that on the very crowded bus we were getting here. It's an interesting observation you make around accountability at this COP, and particularly around how countries are holding each other to account. Right up front, very quickly, What's your observation thus far about the statements being made in the national statements, and what do you think that indicates?
Yeah, well, I would pick out three by way of example that really speak to accountability. The first one was the speaker from Kenya, who talked about the diversion of funds away from poverty and healthcare to account for the problems that they've had in the country, food specifically. And to me, that's a damning indictment of everything that could go wrong, in the sense that it is a terrible thing when you have to divert resources away from what will be future and current sort of health and education into disaster recovery. The Kenya was very, very explicit in calling those to account for those challenges. The second one that I'd speak to was Slovakia, who called out the reduction of coal via plants in the face of record energy prices, and in doing so called to account the geopolitical headwinds that are clearly in place at the moment. And then the third one, of course, was the irrepressible Mayor Motley, who called everyone to account, frankly, and is really the clarion call for making change in a very systematic way. But when I speak about accountability, I mean, really calling people to account for the things that they have not yet done. So just one final example. Before this COP started, 24 of the 100+ commitments to deliver updated NDCs was the figure that we were looking at. So a really underwhelming figure.
Yeah.
That crept up to 29. But we were still hearing a lot of calls to say, like, this is just not good enough. And they were very upfront about it in the national statement.
Yeah. Now, Clea, you were in the room.
Yes, I was.
Such excitement.
I know.
Would you echo what Pete just said? That observation around each other now calling to account
Yes.
their ambition and their actions?
Yes, and I would actually add to it. I joined the high-level panel for the Forest and Climate Leaders Pledge, which is a follow-up to last year's announcement at Glasgow on protecting forests, basically, bluntly speaking, with a strong focus on Africa.
Yeah. And can I inject?
Yes.
Australia has signed up to it.
Wonderful. Hello. And by the way, I have to applaud Australia's recent leadership and ambition in this space.
It's quite amazing.
It's very visible.
More to be done. But
I live in Geneva and I see it, even on the Geneva ground.
Yeah,
You can see the Australian diplomats being active, etc. So it's really cool. So I just had to congratulations.
Sidebar on that one.
Yes,
Thank you.
sidebar. Practically speaking, and I've been working in the space for a while, and I'm an idealist. I don't describe myself as too idealistic, and I can sometimes maybe appear a bit jaded. I was inspired yesterday.
Yeah.
I was sitting there and I was in awe because you had world leaders, President Macron, the head of the European Commission, von der Leyen. You had Olaf Scholz from Germany.
Yeah.
You had many African leaders from Ghana, from the Congo. List goes on and on and on, all offering different perspectives, but speaking clearly towards the same goal. Very clearly saying, if we want to achieve net zero, if we want to even have a small shot at 1.5, and I'm speaking bluntly, we need to protect our forests and we need to restore nature.
Yeah.
And in order to do that, we have made a big commitment, and a year later, we want to show you what we've done. And you had each one of these heads of states going there and saying, in Africa, they said, millions of trees planted. Look what we did. Look at the impact. Governments, Germany, and I am a German citizen, but regardless, I was just inspired saying, this is the money we had committed.
Yeah.
This is what we spend. This is what's coming. See exactly what we have done. So not only were they holding each other to account, but they were speaking on the same messages towards the same vision and goal, fierce urgency for more. And it was just incredibly inspiring. So I almost had like goosebumps because I do not see this often.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, and I'm sort of paraphrase that by saying, could you also see that this is the lockstep COP in the sense that Lula da Silva has come into power in Brazil, We have a White House that is very focused on the energy transition. We have an Australian government that's very focused on decarbonisation. Do you, and I'm not asking you for a political comment around that, but did you get a sense in what you've both seen so far that countries are speaking with one voice about needing to do more?
That, yes,
Right.
that absolutely, yes. I do think that there, and this is all a personal opinion, obviously,
Sure.
right? I cannot go into the larger organizational perspective on this, but I do think there is some apprehension, especially today. We should not forget that today are the midterm elections
Yes.
in the US.
Yeah.
And I would say that the political leaders here right now are observing this very, very carefully.
Right.
This has implications.
Yeah.
In addition to that, however, I would agree, I have not seen this kind of consensus before, this kind of concern. The other thing is, and you brought that up, geopolitics and the war in the Ukraine came up a lot,
Oh, right.
which was
Yeah,
also
yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
That directness, that openness, but yeah, it's really impressive. Governments agree, we are doing something, we need to do more.
And maybe I'll just jump in here. In business, we often talk about tension, and there are two types of tension. There's healthy tension and there's unhealthy tension. And I think a lot of the speakers here have been engaged in healthy tension. You know, there's been calling folks to account, but in a way, just to say clear, in a directional way that speaks with the universal voice, but still with that healthy tension. Now, I would caveat all of that. Of course, we haven't heard meaningful statements from sort of three very, very big voices. So the US midterms have been dominating that discussion over the last 24, 48 hours. And I think Biden will be here next week. So we should look out for that. You know, China, we have the envoy, but we'll see, you know, what pronouncements, you know, and of course, Russia, you know, which has been the recipient of a lot of criticism.
Is Russia here? I haven't seen
I
a
haven't
delegation.
seen them. I know the US Special Envoy, John Kerry, is here, China, but I have not seen the Russia delegation. I know there is a Ukraine pavilion.
There is a Ukraine pavilion next door to the Australian pavilion,
We'll have to visit.
of which there is the best coffee at the COP. Correct. Yeah.
And just visit the Australian pavilion, obviously. But I have not seen the Russian delegation.
That was a seamless segue from war to coffee. I mean, that's
Thank you. Thank you.
It's COP in action.
which
Thank you.
actually may bring up another point you want to raise, which is talking about some of the logistics here.
Yes.
Because you talked about Article 6 and some of the
Yes.
challenges with that. So just for the folks tuning in, there have been, it's such an incredibly warm welcome from the hosts here. That said, there are still some logistical challenges with catering, with water. We were talking about it earlier, and with room allocation. And the reality is that the success of a COP can sometimes depend on the little things. And so if negotiators can't get into the room correctly, or if they're not well fed and watered, that can really be a challenge.
Yeah. I totally agree. Even with the enormous logistic operation that it is, those little things can undermine the heightened expectation of what this particular COP, particularly and interestingly for Australians, the media narrative over the last 24 hours is that it's not going well here. And you think, hang on, I'm missing something, because I don't think that's true at all. So are we just creating a false narrative for the purpose of getting media headlines, or is there some other reason going on? I will close that as a conversation for my blog for later today. Let's move to business, because that's ostensibly why we're all here. What are you seeing so far about the presence of business at the COP? And what role do we really play at a COP? Who wants to go first?
Happy to go first. I can tell you, and I've seen a lot of our members already around and catching up with them, and there are many more coming in today. From a practical perspective, we have seen unprecedented interest. As WBCSD, we can allocate badges to our members, which is a very popular topic. I should mention that. I never knew I would know so much about badges, but c'est la vie.
Everybody, show their badge.
Yeah, badges are really important, especially the blue zone badge, because it allows you to come to the certain VIP area of COP. So high demand.
I've got a pink one. Hello,
but it's still blue.
Don't say that.
So there are all these, plus we all have a different terminology and what we are, observer versus party, WBCSD, could allocate about 90 badges, which is significant also because we play a key role managing the industry track with the Marrakesh partnership, the flies. That's why I'm doing this.
Yes.
We had 390 requests for badges
390
from our members.
Wow.
The demand was insane. So it was actually extremely difficult to prioritize and so on.
Yeah.
So we had a high demand.
Well, to the extent that BCSD Australia had to give a overflow badge to one of your colleagues.
I know, because our team couldn't be here because our members have priority.
It's amazing, isn't it?
So it was just, and we saw that UNFCCC at the same time was amazing in indicating and highlighting how supportive they are and having especially CEO presence here.
Right.
So we got that signal very clear. I would say, practically speaking, because we also have to be practical, I thought that there were a few more CEOs present in Glasgow than here for now. Maybe that changes. There are CEOs here, but CEO level wise. However, larger business presence overall, for sure, larger for sustainability leaders. But also increasingly finance. That's the big thing. Finance is absolutely core and critical. And I'm seeing much more interest in the financial community.
Yeah.
Chief sustainability officers, legal professionals, accountants. So technical, this is almost because it's the implementation COP. I would say extremely high interest from business on the technical side.
They're here to learn
They're
what's
here
next.
to learn and to contribute.
Yeah, right.
Because that's the other part. Also yesterday at the high level panel, in general, there's a growing understanding that says we need to involve business in these discussions. Business will be part of the solution. And if we cannot get businesses to do this, we won't get there.
Yeah.
So we want business to be involved from the beginning.
Yeah.
And also, I see our companies and I see businesses stepping up much more because they see the importance of a functioning global system.
Yeah, right.
And that is something, especially these fractured times where we have so many things that we've taken for granted, breaking down in some areas, ranging from the practical linking to some trade side as highlighted by COVID, the pandemic, but also the war, to the more philosophical and important link to discussions around human rights, etc. We are seeing companies increasingly stepping up because they also see the value and the benefit for their own business to have a functioning system.
That's interesting because what I hear from that is that the climate negotiations and its intended output is actually a constant for everyone in a disturbed, disrupted, disconnected world.
Something
very interesting.
It's something we can still unify under, and that adds something, right? That unites and brings people together, and that is really inspiring.
Who would ever thought we could be additive as distinct from anyway?
Well, I mean, on that point, I mean, I echo everything that Clea said. I mean, I think business ads, and I should note that I'm accredited through the International Chamber of Commerce, so which has a large delegation just nearby, which is fabulous.
But not as good coffee. I just thought of that.
Always good water.
No, yeah, there you go. Maybe fewer flies. I know, but I will say there are a lot more flies on me than there are on you. But what I will say is that business adds the detail to the sort of grand statements coming from countries, and we are still early in this COP. And I think something to look out for in the next 10 days will be how the business community ramps up. Even from today's journey in, it was clear that a huge number of people, more people were coming in. And I think just to mention the point on finance, I think mitigation finance has long been, kind of interest, principally because you have a lot of, it's a very clear way to see returns when you do mitigation projects. Adaptation, though, I think is really coming to the fore now.
Right.
And adaptation finance has historically been much more challenging. And I think, and I'm hearing a lot of conversations around that. There are roundtables, there are side events. And it's really to put the flesh on the bones of the architecture that is put in place by the global leaders. It's business's role, and the way it manifests climate, sort of like to think we play some role in that to identify, to bring transparency to the business that needs to happen, to give effect to these commitments so that they are no longer pledges, they are actually, as we are here, in action.
Yeah. Okay. So we need to probably start thinking about wrapping up. And the last question is, what does success look like? But I want to sort of change that slightly by saying, what are you tracking? Because we'll put it into the COP barometer. What are you tracking, and what for you in the areas that you're tracking does success look like? And the context of that is really brilliant piece of work that Lewis Hill did on the good cop, bad cop
Yes.
that we saw
he's
recently.
amazing.
And
Yes.
we shared some of that in the yesterday's session,
Good.
actually. And I just thought, well, it's an interesting one to pick up on, because traditionally we look at the big issues, and in this case, it's obviously finance,
Mitigation.
adaptation, ambition, and so on. But you've also got these sidebars, things like the bilaterals, the furtherance of the JAFANs, the furtherance of the methane pledge, because there's a meeting today apparently about the next steps associated with that. And that, for Australia particularly, brings them into the tent, which is a very appropriate metaphor in this particular part of the world, to engage, and for business particularly to engage. So what are each of you looking at around that kind of, Andrew, put this on the barometer because I think you need to track it. I think Clea's thinking, so
Okay,
you go first.
well, I'll start with a couple. I think Article 6 and how that plays out.
Yeah,
You know, I think there was a conclusion last year.
So for those of you who don't know what Article 6 is.
Yeah, so these are really the international mechanisms that allow for, that really are the successor to things like the Clean Development Mechanism, joint implementation. These are the things that allow individual countries to effectively trade and transfer the activities that are beneficial for the climate, and actually trade effectively credits in layman's terms between each other. A huge amount, Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, that's the context. At the end of Glasgow last year, there was huge progress made on some of the modalities, i.e. the detail around how Article 6 action would work in practice. And I think there was a lot of positive sentiment coming from that it would kickstart a new era in this kind of trading and activity. I think the feeling from the early stages is a slightly rocky start because of logistics, and still sort of quote a long way to go. And I think that will be interesting to see how that pans out, to see whether that is the same sense at the end of this COP as it is at the beginning. So that's one thing. And the other thing I'll just mention is GFANs. You mentioned it, the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero. Lots of great content coming out of those that group in the last little while. See how that's going to actually be received on the ground. Those are two things I'm looking for.
Cool. Clea, last words.
On our side, I'd say we're tracking the big things overall, right? And to everything that you've mentioned, obviously big GFANs, but also new financial commitments that will be coming up. There's a strong interest in that area. Follow up on the forest discussions, methane, Article 6. We're doing mapping. We have a whole team, a policy team, including myself, looking at this. I think one thing that hadn't come up before and that I see growing interest in on the policy side is price of carbon and possible trading linked to Article 6, carbon price, especially to, I don't know if you've heard, but
it's back.
It's back. There are rumors circulating about countries, in particular Brazil, Indonesia, and I believe Ghana, but I have to check just they're are looking, and it's a rumor into making something like an OPEC for forests.
Yes.
That would
Yes.
quantify and add a price to forest protection. This is coming up at the same time that the news are now circulating that Switzerland is paying other countries, emerging countries, for its own emission reductions, things like this. There's a lot of discussion. So I would not underestimate price of carbon price. That's something I'm monitoring very closely.
Okay.
Because everything else is there anyway, but that's a new one. It's back. I mean, it's a new, but it's back. And yesterday I heard world leaders mentioning it and alluding to possible things happening very soon. And that could be groundbreaking if we get there.
And speaking of groundbreaking, just 10 seconds, if I may, just indulge me.
We're all excited.
Loss and damage.
Yes,
Clearly,
yes,
that's a big
loss
one.
and
We should
damage.
let's
not forget that.
And also the how the Inflation Reduction Act from the US is going to spur competition to try and to see how that's received here, I think would be very illuminating.
Well, it's already been mentioned in the financial and business press in Australia as potentially crowding out investment opportunity in Australia. And you know, you got to play. You got to get in there. So it'd be interesting to see Australia compete for that kind of money. In the same way.
Well, the US is effectively acting as one of the biggest venture capitalists in the world, and the question will be after the IRA, like who will step up and compete?
It'll be Australia.
Okay.
Oh,
there we go.
It'll be Australia.
I have to say,
Yes.
I am, and it's a small thing, right?
Yeah.
My daughter, who's 8 years old,
Yeah.
she's telling me she either wants to become like an animal protectionist, whatever that is, but it's
Right.
very inspiring.
Sounds like working in a zoo.
Exactly. Or she wants to become an explorer of planets. She's in that stage,
Okay.
right?
Right.
An astronomer. However, her primary wish destination right now in the whole world is Australia. And I'm having almost weekly debates with her about why we are not going to Australia. And it is about the koala and the kangaroo.
Right.
And why are we not going to Australia? So maybe there's going to be an opportunity.
Clea,
You never know. And the climate agenda.
as I explained at the council meeting in Tokyo only 2 weeks ago, we are trying very hard to get the very first Australian COP. And the latest understanding is it'll be 2026. Well, that's certainly where our intent is to apply for it. So that's COP31. But as I caution everybody, we have to go through a national election before we get to 2026. So anything can happen, and it usually does. But, you know, fingers crossed, we'll get to help your then, 11-year-old daughter, 12-year-old daughter, experience the wonders of the natural flora and fauna of our beautiful country.
She will come.
Totally. All right. So big thank you to both Clea and to Pete for today and contributing. For now, though, thank you very much. My name is Andrew Petersen. Good luck and Godspeed. Bye for now.